Let's turn to Michael O'Hanlon now, as we often do, Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy at Brookings Institution, a nonprofit public policy organization. Good to see you. Thank you.
Hey, Shepard, good to see you.
Big picture, the allegation from the Israelis is that the Iranians turned this up, sending missiles or rockets over the border. Did they, and where are we?
Well, of course, the big picture in terms of where we are is that Assad has largely won the civil war inside of Syria with Hezbollah help and therefore with Iranian help. And Iran's going to take advantage of that. Iran is going to move military forces in to be positioned to support Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also to be able to potentially menace Israel itself. And this is a bad outcome, one of the many bad outcomes of the Syrian civil war. Now, obviously, Israel doesn't have the option of just going in and marching ground forces into western Syria. It doesn't have enough of an army to do that successfully. And when it's tried to occupy Lebanon in the past, it's run out of people and run out of patience and suffered a lot of casualties. So the only option Israel's had, really, is to use air power when provoked, either when they see those Iranian interests inside of Syria being used to ship weapons directly to Hezbollah, or when they see this rocket fire. So in a sense, this has been brewing now for 7 years throughout the whole Syrian civil war, and I see it as largely inevitable and ongoing. And
is there an indication now that the Iranians will strike back? Because there seems to be a feeling now with tensions among Netanyahu's folks that could cause a real escalation.
Well, I think they will strike back. It's in sort of their nature, not the Iranian people, of course, but the hardliners that you just talked about with Soleimani and others. And so I think they will. They may not do it inside of Syria or right in the northern area of Israel. It may be asymmetric. It may be in some other part of the broader Middle East, not directed directly against Israel, but against Western interests broadly defined. It could be in some other part of the world, or it could be right there in the Lebanon, Western Syria theater. They'll do something. The question is, do they, view their position as being relatively strengthened anyway, because Assad has largely won the Syrian civil war, and therefore they can take a hit but still be in a better place than they had been a decade ago? Or do they feel the need to pursue an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? Knowing the Middle East, my money is on the latter possibility.
This has been a proxy war ongoing for a long time, and John Bolton has been saying for many years that that there will eventually be war in Iran. And just one of many of the sound bites that we can pull from him, listen to this one.
The behavior and the objectives of the regime are not going to change, and therefore the only solution is to change the regime itself. And that's why before 2019, we here will celebrate in Tehran. Thank you very much.
We will celebrate in Tehran before February of 2019. That would mark 40 years since the Iranian Revolution. Is it the policy of the United States, spoken or unspoken, for regime change in Tehran? Because it certainly sounded like it right there.
It did sound like it, Shepard. I don't think what John Bolton said there was particularly realistic. I sympathize with where he was coming from, but that's the sort of thing that's easier to say before your national security advisor, and certainly easier to say than to do, no matter when and where you're talking. I think if you want to redefine regime change as somehow incentivizing future leaders within the Islamic Republic to behave differently, and you could call that regime change after the fact. Maybe what Kim Jong-un is doing now is regime change in North Korea because he's trying to turn into a charming guy. But I have my doubts about whether he's changed. And I think, I would have my doubts about the Iran scenario. The bottom line is we don't have the ability in a country of nearly 100 million people to go in and create regime change. We can try to squeeze them economically with the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, and that will have some impact. I don't know that it's going to be enough. They didn't seem to change their regime in the last few years when we had sanctions in place. So I'm pretty skeptical about Mr. Bolton's implication, even though I understand the motivation for what he said.
Michael O'Hanlon from Brookings. Thank you, Michael.